Press the bell icon on the YouTube app to never miss a video from Newslaundry.
Hello and welcome to Newslaundry. Today we have a very special guest for you. A writer, author, defense expert, security analyst, a journalist for 34 years, Nitin Gokhale. Welcome to Newslaundry.
Thank you, Anand.
The reason why he's here is that he's written his fifth book, if I'm not mistaken. This is your sixth book, right? It's called Securing India the Modi Way. And this is published by Bloomsbury. So this is not so much a review of the book, Nitin, but just a freewheeling discussion on the content that was in the book and the things that are going on. I think our viewers will be more interested in there's a lot of confusion on, to begin with Doklam and things of that sort. So we'd like to have your views on that, which is incidentally also a part of this book. And I found this book to be riveting. And at the same time, there were portions that were quite laudatory towards the government and the defense minister, who incidentally has written a foreword for this. So I'm ready with my critique, and I'm sure Nitin would be very eager to answer the question. So let's begin straight away by asking you, Nitin, how long did you take to write this book? Because the events are very contemporary, and it's very rare to find 200 odd pages ready when the events, I think the last event that you describe is just 6 months old. Very fresh in the public memory.
Yes, actually first of all, thank you very much for having me, because the book has been out in the market for almost 3 months now.
Right.
I released it on 29th of September.
Yes.
So it went into print around the 10th of September. You will recall that Dolam resolution was announced on 28th of August.
Yes.
And I had just come back from China the previous week. On 27th was a Sunday. I remember 28th to be a Monday, if I remember correctly. And I had done most of the details of Dolam before the resolution was announced. But I was aware that something was cooking, something was happening, that it's going to be resolved. So the moment it was resolved, I finished that chapter. And that was the only chapter which was left.
Right.
So that I finished around 5th or 6th of September. And we sent it for print on 10th of September.
Right.
So it is as contemporary as that.
Yes.
So how long, to answer your question specifically, how long did it take me to write? To write, it took me about 4.5 to 5 months.
Okay.
But the conception or the idea came to me in February of 2017.
Yes, in fact, you write about it.
That's right.
You begin, the book with that. You say that you were giving a talk. Incidentally, Nitin also gives a lot of talks and teaches in military institutes around India. So you gave a talk, and one person just walked up to you and said, "Why do the media always doubt our military's ability?"
That's right.
And that's where it began.
That's where it began. It happens with me all the time.
Right.
I mean, the previous book actually on the Sri Lanka Elam War 4.
Right.
Also, actually, the idea got germinated exactly of the similar question in one of the institutes, where when I had come back from there in 2009, and they said that we don't seem to have a fair idea of how the military operations were carried out.
Yeah.
So I wrote that book in about 4 months. That war or that conflict ended on May 19th, 2009.
Right.
And I was out with a book in September on Sri Lanka, from war to peace.
Right.
That was the title
so
of the book.
I have a lot of, as you would expect, a lot of questions after reading this book. And they may not be chronologically
Doesn't
arranged
matter.
because the chapters also go to and fro.
Go to
you
and fro.
first mention the Uri attack, and then you go back in time for the Myanmar thing,
That's
and then
right.
you float around. Yes. But let me begin by something which is still simmering, which is the Doklam,
That's right.
the whole controversy, we can call it now.
Sure.
So can you tell, and in fact you have a chapter, you describe in detail the chronology of what actually happened in Doklam.
Yes.
But maybe for our viewers you can give a much more detailed account of what actually started it, and
right.
secondly to come back to the germ for this book,
sure.
which is that there are still a lot of people in the media
right.
who are continuously doubting, I'm not saying they're wrong or right,
yes.
but they're doubting the Indian version. So what's your take?
Yes. See, first of all, I want to say this, that in a way China has won the battle of perception in that episode, because 99% of the people, including, I don't know why, the MEA spokesperson, our official statements, Indian official statements, call that area Doklam. Whereas the Indian army and Bhutanese people and the Sikkimese actually call it Dolam.
Right. So that, in fact, there are three names for it.
Yes,
right?
Donglang, Doklam and Dolam.
Okay.
So I have stuck to Dolam in my speaking, my writing, wherever I'm writing. So I will continue to use Dolam, because that's something my friends
I will also from
yes.
Dolam. Okay.
So to come back to...
So that's the Bhutanese...
Sikkimese and the Indian Army term for that area.
Right.
The Chinese call it Donglang, L-A-N-G. And Doklam, somehow it's now the thing which has come up, somebody started using it, and so it's Doklam.
I think the rascal Shivarur has something to do with it, because he said, is it Dhokla or Doklam?
No, I don't know, but I think maybe Donglang has turned into Doklam, so that could be one, but I have not gone and contested.
So the whole thing is actually now about 7 months old. I mean, in June of...
Yes, actually it started off, it came to light officially, if you remember, with a statement from the Chinese.
Right.
The day, and the Chinese timed it beautifully. Prime Minister Modi was meeting...
A week to go before the BRIC summit, wasn't it?
That was the second one. That was a resolution.
Okay, right.
I'm talking about, they made it public that there is a face-off when Prime Minister Modi was in the US, and he was meeting their Secretary of Defense, Rex Tillerson. Oh, sorry, he's not... James Mattis was calling on him. And they released a statement saying this is what has happened at Dolam, and India has now blocked us, which is an act of aggression. Is the timed it beautifully, blaming India for the thing that you've crossed over into our territory, and this is not acceptable. So that was the time it became public. But actually the face-off began almost a month before that, as I put it in my chronology in the book.
So in fact, you say that the Chinese weren't expecting Bhutan to actually side with India.
No, what they were...
Initially.
No, I think, I don't know whether it comes out in the book or not, but from what I see, that the Chinese expected...
so you say, sorry, just to interrupt, you say Beijing did not expect India to cross the line and come to Bhutan's aid when it became apparent that the PLA, which is the People's Liberation Army, was trying to alter the status quo.
That's right. So I'm saying they expected a diplomatic protest from Bhutan, but not a military intervention from India.
I see.
Because India's got nothing to do with it technically and under international norms. It is neither Indian territory nor a bilateral dispute between India and China.
Right.
It is actually a bilateral dispute between Bhutan and China.
Oh, hang on. So are you saying that we had no business to get into this whole...
No, we have all the business.
Why? If it is... Yeah, please explain.
I'll tell you. Because India has got a treaty with Bhutan for a long time, and it was amended in 2007 to cater to the new developments in Bhutan, in the sense democracy was just flourishing. It was just coming in.
Right.
It was about to flourish. So, keeping in view the new sentiments and new sensitivities, the old treaty of 1950 was amended in 2007.
Right.
So earlier it was said that it is India's obligation to see to it that Bhutan's foreign policy and security is guaranteed by India. The 2007 treaty actually amended one sentence and said Bhutan will conduct its foreign and security policies in consultation with India.
I see.
That's a key difference that was done in that treaty between India and Bhutan. And yet, it is understood between the people of Bhutan and people of India, especially in the governments of the two countries, that India will always come to the aid of the Bhutanese.
So, in a sense, 2007 you say, so that's basically under the UPA.
Yes.
So would you say that was a climb down in sense of, power brokering that goes on or real politics sense of, I mean, why did we replace the earlier thing with consultation? Because that is that gives Bhutan more leverage.
I won't blame UPA because I think they went with the sense of reality. The realism had set in that Bhutan is changing. It's no longer absolute monarchy.
Right.
The parliament, the democracy had set in there, and elections were being held. So it was par for course that India allows Bhutan the space and treats it as a sovereign country.
Yes, absolutely.
Earlier, a lot of people in India, in the media, have wrongly written that Bhutan is India's protectorate, and India is obliged to protect Bhutan. Yes, it is obliged, but not under a treaty. In that sense, it is not obliged. I mean, I may be contradicting myself here, but I'm saying it's a sovereign country.
Right.
But it has the closest links with India, and in any case, if you see the geography, the Bhutanese have to come south for everything that they need.
So who reacted first to Chinese quote-unquote aggression?
Yes.
Was it Bhutan or was it India?
No.
Or was it in consultation?
In consultation. So
with Bhutan?
Yes. Okay. So what happened was that one incident, the PLA, it's on the two parallel ridges. India is on this ridge, let's say, in Sikkim. Bhutan is on this ridge, and there is a valley. So between these two ridges, the Chinese patrol. So one fine day, the Chinese patrolled and climbed up to the Bhutanese temporary post, and threatened them that you cannot build this, you have to remove this temporary structure, the bunker that was there, and they sort of almost put the gun to their temple, the Bhutanese soldiers there, the Royal Bhutanese Army. So the Indians were watching. It's not such a distance.
Right.
So the matter was reported, and they could see that this road, which was stopped, the construction was stopped in 2007, is again being sought to be resumed.
Right.
And they try it every year, but this time there were much more strength. Bulldozers had come in, engineering company had come in. When I say company, about 100 odd construction workers, all that. So the Indian local commander reported the matter up the chain, and he was told, okay, you stop that. We can't allow that because that is altering the status quo. This is under the 2012 treaty between the three countries, or understanding, let me not put it treaty, but an understanding between Bhutan, India and China that any alteration to the ground situation will be done in with mutual consultation. Now they were breaking that consensus of 2012, which was done under UPA. And so the Indian commander was well within his rights to come to the aid of the Bhutanese. So when they saw these people coming up in with their bulldozers and their engineering equipment, India just went and stood there. So technically it crossed into China.
So, okay, when you say China, it is disputed territory
between Bhutan
and China.
So China says there's no dispute.
Yeah.
India says there is dispute because of that tri-junction problem is there, because India also is part of that tri-junction. Yeah. India says the tri-junction is at Batangla. Right. They say it's at Gemochen, which is further south.
And all the Brits doing, right?
All the Brits doing. That's the Sikkim Treaty of 1890, and those guys have left so many things unattended and unresolved.
Palestine, Africa.
Yes, you name it, and
East,
it's there.
Everywhere. Yeah. So, and then, as you describe in quite some detail,
yes.
Unexpectedly, the Chinese premier wasn't expecting Modi to actually go and talk to him.
Yeah, the Chinese president.
The Chinese president.
Xi Jinping at Hamburg.
Right. Yeah.
You have to understand, when I said this, when I write this, there's a background to it. In the Chinese system, the top leaders never get into the nitty-gritty of negotiations or discussions, ever. They just give broad directions, and it is left to the mandarins. I mean, therefore they are called mandarins. So, and they never take the initiative of talking about disputes with the leaders. The disputes are always talked between officials. That's what China experts tell me. I may be wrong, they may be wrong, but that's the exact point that comes out. So here, Prime Minister Modi saw him sitting in that lounge, and he was down the chain as far as the protocol was concerned, because he's Prime Minister, he's President. Yeah. So after every other meeting was over, he saw him sitting there with his officials. So he told his team that let's walk up to President Xi and let's see what happens. So they walked up, and there he broke the ice, saying that apparently he told President Xi, a stunned President Xi, and I put a photograph there with his aides actually showing on their face that they didn't know what hit them. Yeah. And he says that we are two large countries with strategic interest, strategic relationship. Why are we bothered about this?
And this was a week before BRICS.
This was, I think, 10
Hamburg,
days
10
also,
days, yeah,
10 days before the BRICS. And so, no, I think it will be much more. Sorry, I'm getting the dates mixed up, but it must be at least a month before BRICS.
So, I mean, the question is that if, and it's certainly laudable that, the Prime Minister actually did so, why can't he do so more often with, and here is the troubling question for a lot of people, with, I don't know whether we can call China our real quote-unquote enemy, but we certainly seem to have a lot of enemies.
That's right.
Why can't he do it on a more regular basis to break ice with people?
Well, I don't know.
Well,
about,
I mean, he
tried with
Nawaz
Nawaz Sharif.
Yes, he tried.
He
and
tried.
nothing happened, yes.
I think if you see over the last 3.5 years, almost 4 years now in May, he has actually given a shot at a positive outreach to almost all people who were, or almost all problems, or that India faces, maybe Pakistan, maybe China. He tried with Xi Jinping. He went out of the way to host him in Ahmedabad.
Yes.
Went out of the way to Xiamen when he went to China. I mean, allowed. So it was a effort to actually mend fences with both China and Pakistan. In return, all that he has got is only more hostility.
Right.
So it's not, you can't blame him for at least trying with these two main adversaries.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes.
As far as the status quo boundary disputes with China are concerned,
Yes.
you are not very optimistic that in Modi's, I mean, the rest 1 year, and if he gets re-elected again,
Boundary is a question
it's not
of
going
history.
to be,
it's not going. It's a very complicated thing. It's a very complicated issue which cannot be settled in a hurry, because there are various strands to it, and therefore the previous two governments had decided that we will allow both sides, China and India, that we will allow our future generations to settle this. Right. They had postponed this problem to a future date. But I think Modi and his security advisors believe that it cannot be postponed. I mean, you have to take them head on.
But do you get this feeling increasingly? I mean, this also is not only because Rahul Gandhi, the leader of the opposition, has gotten much more active and feisty on Twitter.
Yeah.
Including the, paraphrasing Doklam as Dhokalam and things of that sort. Do you think the present dispensation is much more ambivalent or much more wants to be friendlier with China than our opposition wants it to be?
Well, don't forget Rahul Gandhi went and met the Chinese ambassador. So I don't know who's trying to be more friendly.
Right.
So I'm not... See, the sense I get from talking to security managers, and I must put a disclaimer out here that I have not met Prime Minister Modi yet.
Right.
Ever.
Okay.
Ever. One flitting handshake we had was in 1999, in August 1999, when he was the in charge of, I think, Himachal Pradesh from the BJP side, and we met on the Shatabdi coming from Chandigarh to Delhi. I used to work for Outlook that time, and we were chasing somebody in Chandigarh. So my immediate boss that time, Ajit Pillai, and me, we were traveling back, and he knew Ajit. Okay. So that's how he said, "Hello, Pillai ji, kaise hai?" And then he introduced me. That was the only time. So it's been ages that I've seen him from close quarters also. So the sense I get from his security team is, to come back to the present situation, is that the principle that they have applied to China is that we will be resolute on the border and reasonable in diplomacy. I think I've written this.
And friendly in
other issues, which I think has been a consensus for some time.
Yeah, so that is what I want to come to.
Yes.
When you say securing India the Modi way.
That's right.
The next question is, how is this different from what Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's policy was for the last 10 years, as far as, I mean, we'll come to Pakistan in a bit, but as far as China is concerned? Because we have, I would say, I mean, of course, leave aside 1962, we have never considered China as the real enemy. I mean, we've always been very competitive with it. We've been friendly with it. The Indo-China trade is, flourishing and things of that sort.
Yeah.
So how is Modi different from the previous government?
Okay. First of all, I don't agree that we are not looking at China as our adversary number one. I'll use the word adversary rather than enemy. I think 2012 onwards, and I must give credit to the previous government in that sense, that they sensed this, that unless you up the game in the infrastructure, the wherewithal for the military and all that, so they actually looked at reorienting the Indian security mind towards looking at China as a potential bigger threat than Pakistan.
Is that right?
In the circles at the highest level, the discussion was on. So the China study group ordered more roads to be built. It's another matter that they couldn't enforce anything, they couldn't implement anything. In panic, they announced the Mountain Strike Corps in 2014 without assigning any adequate finances to it.
But do we have a lot of think tanks in India or policy institutes that actually are dedicated towards looking at the India-China dispute?
Not many. I'm afraid not many, because one.
So we remain Pakistan-centric.
Very much so. But I would think the Indian military and some part of the other parts of the security establishment have started reorienting themselves towards looking at China, and now it's accelerated. In this government's tenure, it's actually got accelerated. Okay. So that is the difference. I remember, and I must, I'll take a minute on telling you kind of things that go on in track 2 and all that. My one and only.
By the way, all the gory inside details and all the off the records that you've been subjected to, everything, just please spill it out.
So one of the rare and perhaps the only track 2 that I have attended with the Pakistanis was in Dubai. The New America Foundation had organized it. The famous journalist Peter Bergen and Steve Cole had organized it in Dubai, and I was part of that. And I remember in the final session we were talking about, can the two militaries have confidence building measures? Mm-hmm. So in the course of my presentation, I said exactly what I just told you, that the Indian military, I had said Indian military that time because I didn't have, till then in April 2012, I didn't have access to the higher decision makers. I had to the military decision makers, of course, and they had already started looking at China as a much bigger threat, bigger adversary. So I said Indian military, and because the topic was Indian military, so I said Indian military has started looking at China as a bigger threat than Pakistan. And I endorse it because to me, Pakistan is like a monkey on our back, mm-hmm. which we can shake off anytime. It's a nuisance. So there was a retired brigadier, Pakistani brigadier, in the Pakistani delegation, I would say. He actually stood up in the middle of my presentation and said, "How can you say this? We are your enemy number one. You cannot say Pakistan is not your enemy. China cannot be your enemy number one." So that gives you the Pakistan-centric or India-centric thinking in Pakistan and Pakistan thinking.
But here's the thing. I mean, in fact, you talk in detail about in one of the chapters that you have about our preparedness as far as the non-military, i.e. the scientific part, the technological part, yes. As that advances,
yes.
a proper, I dare to suggest, war with China is inconceivable.
That's
right.
You
talk about Agni, you talk about
yes.
All the other missile systems.
Yes.
So there is such huge deterrence to a conventional war.
Sure.
So that, in fact, that's the idea that struck me. Is it that China, it's probably China because of the geopolitical concerns that it doesn't want to be very friendly with India, because then, it doesn't want the Pakistan, I can say the card that it has to be just frittered away. Is that one of the...
In fact, China's problem with India is that it considers India as the only potential competitor in its quest for hegemony in Asia to begin with,
right.
And then Indo-Pacific, and then finally the global order. Because India's got demographic dividend, then India's got the scientific and technological prowess. It's got a huge landmass. It is right next to China, and it is the only power in Asia which shows signs of standing up to China. Everybody else has sort of tried to stand up to China and keeled over. Yeah. If you look at East Asia, if you look at Far East, the Russians are no longer as strong as they were. They are now dependent on the Chinese.
Right.
So therefore, they see India as the only competitor in that sense, and therefore they never talk about India in their official publications. It's a deliberate neglect, perceived neglect of the Indian mind. In the strategic thinking, they never talk about it.
Okay, just the final question on Indo-China,
yes.
because then we have
of course.
The monkey off our back to cover in detail.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, as far as the Modi doctrine is concerned, as you know, China for the last, or at least from the time of the UPA 1 to end of UPA 2, China was economically growing at a frightening pace, 10, 11%. I remember, there were years when it was 10, 11%, and India was lagging behind, and we had so many problems, and China was actually, if you compare our relations with China at that point of time, and you compare now when India is actually, economically it's climbing up, China is coming down, I would say UPA came across as a very creditable, a power to interact with China. I mean, it did not do anything that, let's put it this way, this government wouldn't have done. In fact, it went a little bit above to tackle or to have its relations with China?
You see, with China, it has to be a consistent policy when you're tackling China on all fronts. It's a comprehensive strategy as far as China is concerned.
So are there any advisors that are advising the current regime who were advising the previous regime as far as China is concerned?
I'm not sure who exactly advises, but this government's, how is it different? You had asked me, and I don't think I answered it fully. Yeah. As I said, one line I can describe it is that on the border, in the previous government, in the UPA government, on the border we were very diffident. We were telling the military to be restrained completely, never stand up. In fact, the similar incident had happened in 2013 at DBO and Depsang. So we never sent troops to face off, to do the face off for those 21 days when those tents were pitched in those plains of Depsang. Instead, we just depended on what is called diplomacy. And if you remember then...
but I remember even at that point of time, the opposition, that was the BJP, did not take it up as the current opposition is taking it up. In fact, it was very quiet about it.
Because China, normally they treat China, everyone, the Indian political leadership treats China as with little more reverence and respect than they would do Pakistan. But that time, if you remember, and that remark has sort of got stuck in my mind. Salman Khurshid, when asked, what are you doing about this? And they were hoping for the premier to come. Salman Khurshid says that intrusion or, the infiltration, if you want, it's not infiltration really, it's intrusion, is like a acne on our face. He said that. So the approach then was, let's be diffident, don't provoke China. They're much bigger, they're militarily more powerful, economically, of course, very resurgent. So we are not in a position to take them on. So let's not do anything. This government, while cognizant of the fact that China is far superior militarily, economically, is not going to keel over when it comes to the bullying from China. And that's exactly was proved in 2014 in Chumur, when Prime Minister Modi and President Xi were actually on that swing on the Sabarmati riverfront. That is the time 1,000 Chinese troops intruded into Chumur. India built up 9,000 troops in the next 48 hours and forced them to back down. So the combination of factors and combination of strategy is that we will take them on militarily wherever possible, stop them, show them the eyes, look them into the eyes. But when it comes to diplomacy, we will exert every pressure and and we will explore every possibility to do a non-military solution. I think that is the difference.
So that's the
difference.
Yeah, okay. Now let's come to the the monkey on India's back, the monkey on Arnab's back, the monkey on everyone's back, which is Pakistan. Now, before I come to the riveting details that you describe as far as the Uri thing is concerned, I think a few developments that have taken place in the last couple of weeks, I'd like your opinion on that. One is the sudden upping the ante by Trump, saying that we have spent so much money on these guys and what have they given to us in return?
That's right.
Do you think that was the tweet was how Trump usually reacts, or do you think there was something to it? There were many analysts who were saying that it could have been triggered by India kind of in secret talking with US about how to constrain Pakistan.
I don't have a definite information on what must have happened exactly, what kind of confabulations or what kind of interaction would have taken place. But I know this much. When the Afghanistan policy was announced by President Trump, hours before that, the US National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, had a long conversation with Indian National Security Advisor Ajit Doval.
Right.
Again, nobody is able to confirm it, whether they exchanged notes and all that. But the timing is curious. Why would McMaster really, talk to Doval on just India-US relationship? Because US also sees India as a major player in Afghanistan.
Right.
So that was there. And I think despite whatever Trump comes across as, his team seems to take India and India's inputs seriously, much more seriously. At least the evidence that we have on hand so far, I tend to believe, because this is what they have done. So I'm not surprised if they've also consulted India and Pakistan. And they also know this has been in India's position. This is India's position for 20 years or 25 years. Yeah. So here is the consistency as far as the US is concerned. US knows India's policy or India's concerns about Pakistan are ancient. They're consistent, and I can even trace it back to 1965.
Right.
Not even say the start of this century. So therefore, I think it took a president like Trump, who's completely maverick out of the box, to show Pakistan the reality or put Pakistan in its place. Everyone else, including President Obama, despite what he did with Osama bin Laden and that operation, they were always, if I can use the word, pussyfooting around. Because they thought that Pakistan is extremely important for their campaign in Afghanistan. But I think President Trump has not taken that into consideration. So India may have played definitely some role, if not a major role.
But do you feel with the increasing warming of relations with, definitely warming of relations with Israel, setting aside the UN vote, which I don't know whether the Prime Minister's talked about it or whether our Prime Minister apologized for it or whatever it was. Do you see a kind of coming together of US, Israel and India as far as Pakistan is concerned, how to tackle Pakistan?
Well, I don't think that triangle will be formed. No. I think everyone is dealing with each other bilaterally. US, India, Israel, US, Israel, India. There are three different relationships. Yes, there are some common factors certainly. But on Pakistan, I don't think India will bring in Israel, because it's, it's something that India would like to,
Okay, now why is that? Because, one can expect the Congress government, because even for this visit, it was very kind of rude, yes. I would say, And historically, of course, Indira Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru have been very they've given a cold shoulder to Israel historically. Sure. Even though in 1971 war, they actually helped us with munitions. And then we kind of backstabbed them, in their 1973 war. But it is a fact, I think, that in 1986, Israel offered to bomb Kahuta for...
well, yes. No, I can understand that.
So with this government,
historic,
exactly. Why wouldn't Modi like to involve Israel as far as, Pakistan is concerned?
No, I'm not saying he'll not like to involve Israel in that. What he would do, if at all he is going to use Israel's friendship, it will be in a covert manner,
right.
In a much more subtle manner rather than in your face. Because India continues to maintain that it's a bilateral issue, nobody else, no third party. Even India does not want US to mediate or come in to that. So when I say that that triangle will never be formed, it's not, it's the official triangle that I'm talking about. Foreign policy or statements. Israel always has condemned Pakistan's...
always, and it's always supported
India.
So
that issue India is very assured of. So it will not bring in, and I think it's a mature relationship.
And it's our second largest defense
it is.
partner.
And it's a mature relationship. Look at the Palestinian vote. Israel has not allowed that to come in way of taking it further.
What do you feel on that vote?
No, I think India did what is good for its national interest. I'll tell you why.
Yeah. Please do, because I was one of those who was...
there are far better foreign policy experts and former diplomats who would have explained all that. To my view, India's current policy, both diplomatic and military, is purely dictated by what is called India's own national interest, which is a big change from the earlier government, that they were constantly looking over their shoulder whether I'm going to hurt this sentiment or that sentiment.
So there's
like
a
that.
slight nuance between national interest and domestic.
That's right.
Party,
exactly.
Vote bank.
So this vote bank, the BJP does not have to worry about the Muslim vote bank in that sense, what the Congress had to worry. And therefore they always were wary of openly supporting or openly going about tom-tomming its relationship with Israel. This constraint BJP does not have, neither does Modi have. So therefore they are a little free to interact more. I mean, they've come out of the closet.
But then why this vote then?
So therefore, but also remember, India has consistently said that Palestine issue is something that needs to be settled, going by the historical precedents. So we cannot change a consensus that has been built over the years. So actually India is balancing the
So this is what I... pardon me from saying
no,
so.
Sure.
This is what I kind of am. I get a little bit ruffled with. I suppose with the changing world, with the change in government that is so much more friendlier, or
That's
likes
right.
to be, pretends to be, or likes to be in
Yes.
reality as well with Israel.
Yeah.
What is this historical baggage, Nehruvian baggage that we seem to be carrying with us as far as Palestine and Israel is concerned?
No, I don't know whether we should. So in this particular case, whether we should carry this as Nehruvian baggage. The justification in this case is that Palestinians have been, we have been supporting Palestine for quite some time, and we cannot just abandon them, irrespective of how close we get to Israel. So otherwise other countries will start suspecting our long-term commitments. It may not have, I don't think this government is hung up so much on doctrines or dogmas which were there in the Nehruvian tradition. Right. I don't think that is there. Let us see what happens next, in the sense that if there is another resolution on Palestine which does not involve this kind of a thing about, and it was on a particular issue on the capital.
So you would say it need not even have abstained. It is good that
it's a
voted.
good thing, because I would think that it's a very pragmatic foreign policy that this government is following, and I have actually detailed it in other ways in the book,
right,
on the outreach to Middle East.
Yes,
and
in fact, there's a whole chapter there.
A whole chapter
yes,
there.
Yes.
Also, the outreach to Central Asian republics.
Yeah.
How?
But one thing that I'm relating maybe,
yes.
Distantly relating with Israel and possible help it could give us was, I was astonished to learn that 2 years before the surgical strike, there were 2 SF battalions who were made to get ready for such a strike.
Yes, that was after the Myanmar
yes,
operation.
Yeah.
And see, this is again a far-sighted military leadership and a political leadership which is on the ball. And here I would give credit to both Parrikar, who was the then defense minister, and Lieutenant General Huda, who was the Northern Army commander for a long time. In the army, this is 2.5 years is a lifetime to be army commander.
And to be honest, I don't know whether this was made public, but this was the first time I read about it. So
because I remember when the terrorist strike happened, when the terrorist struck at the Indian army soldiers in Manipur, killing 18 of them. And Parrikar was in a way the newcomer to Delhi,
right,
to the politics of Delhi, to even the military in that sense. He was a completely non-military man.
Yeah.
I remember his anguish and his astonishment. How can anybody kill 18 Indian soldiers and run away? How can you allow this to happen? So his question to the then army chief was that, aren't you going to do anything about it? And that's how that retribution and that planning, of course at the higher level, clearance from the Prime Minister and the involvement of the NSA, all that began. When that happened, if you remember, there was a controversy where deliberately or otherwise, Rajyavardhan Rathod, Colonel Rajyavardhan Rathod went on to TV and said other neighbors should also be wary of what we have done in Myanmar.
Yes.
Now people laughed at it, saying, and the Pakistanis actually went on the offensive, saying, don't think that we are Myanmar,
we are not,
we are a nuclear power and we'll do all that.
Yeah.
But General Huda and the army chief and the others actually were far-sighted, they were perceptive in getting the signals from the political leadership. I remember General Huda telling me that I thought to myself, he said, as an army commander, Northern Army commander, that tomorrow there is no guarantee that this government will not ask me to go do a similar operation in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir.
So basically, the army people knew in terms of that. You would say that the sure-footedness was conveyed to the army.
Correct.
And do you think that was missing during the UPA?
UP had constrained them. They had actually shackled them. One of the things, the analysis that I wrote about the surgical strikes in POK, what it did to the Indian military's mindset. It unshackled the minds of the leaders, the military leadership. Till then, not that, a lot of people have come up with this thing about, we have also done surgical strikes earlier. We've also gone and done cross-border raids. Sure, you've done one cross-border raid, one battalion against the other, one company against the other. But the attitude was one step up in the military leadership or two steps up, people will say, yaar, kar dena, mujhe mat batana. If something goes wrong, the responsibility is yours. We'll see whether to take credit or not. And it never went to the political leadership.
Nitin, to ask a devil's advocate question to that. Some would say, why is that not a prudent strategy? I mean, you've achieved the results that you did. I mean, I'm talking about the quote-unquote surgical, non-surgical strike conducted during the UPA.
Yes.
They got, at that point of time, they got the results. They didn't talk about it. Now, there could be many compulsions or reasons or whatever you may call it that, they did not talk about it. But at the end of the day, they got the job done. How is that different from, I mean, I'm just trying to understand the relationship between the politicians or the government with the army. Do you think army prefers this or that?
No, it doesn't prefer this or that. It is horses for courses. Depends on what the situation is, what the context is. How was this surgical strike different from the earlier ones? The earlier ones were in, everything is in revenge, certainly. But this was more about the Paltan's izzat, that हमारे साथ मार दिए हैं तो उसके भी साथ मारने हैं 14 मारने हैं सिर काट के ले आओ, that kind of thing. So it was more of blood sport in that sense, and it was limited to say one camp or one outpost, something of that kind. In this case, there was a proper planning to strike at 7 targets across a 250 or 300 kilometer arc from down south in Poonch.
Yeah, in fact, you describe it in astonishing detail.
Yes. So south of Pir Panjal, south of Pir Panjal to north of Pir Panjal, going up to Uri. So from Poonch to Uri, which is an arc of 250 kilometers, 7 targets simultaneously or near simultaneously. And anything could have gone wrong. It was a much larger operation, and it was intended.
So let me interrupt you before you carry on with this, the whole thing, because there are what appeared to me exclusive photographs in there.
That's right.
And there are at least about more than a dozen first-hand accounts that I have put in quotes.
Sure.
So how many people did you talk to? I mean, obviously, a lot of people in the army and the government.
Yes, I did talk to a lot of people, and I think this long sort of tenure in journalism comes in handy.
Right.
And if you earn the trust of the people, they open up, they give you the details. That happens. So I must have spoken to about 15 to 20 people.
Yes.
And from the top to bottom, I mean, I've quoted the NSA here.
Yes.
Although he's the most cautious of the lot, given his position. We had 3 extended sessions, I think I described that.
So 2 things that struck me, and when you talk about both the surgical strikes in Myanmar and in Pakistan.
That's right.
And I'll connect it to the next question also, which is that in both cases, in fact, you point out that when you ask how many casualties were there on the other side.
That's right.
Our side doesn't seem to be very sure, or they don't want to talk about it. They say, in both cases, they say 50 to 70.
That's right. 70 to 75 in POK and about 60 there in
So the first
Myanmar.
question is, why is that? Is it because they were in a hurry to come back? And the second question is, when you kill, 65 to 70 people, and I'm talking of the post-Uri surgical strike.
That's right.
How is it that for a week after that, our media completely went ballistic, saying nothing happened, and our politicians saying, give us proof, give us proof. Why, did that disturb you?
Well, I'm used to people distrusting the military for their own political reasons or otherwise. Also.
And of course, you are quite harsh on the government as not providing enough information to begin with.
Yes,
video evidence and so on.
So,
but does it disturb you when people don't trust the
army? It does, and that's where the book began actually.
Yes.
As I said, the first sentence in the book is that somebody, a young soldier, at the colonel level, has just finished his command and come to do a higher command course.
Yeah.
tells me that, you media, you just, I mean, short of telling me that you are anti-national, he tells me everything, that you don't trust us, the things that we do, and day in, day out. It does bother me that the media somehow thinks that to be contrarian is the best thing to happen, and to criticize the government is fine. I mean, one can criticize the government, but when the government is telling you that we have done this, and there are people who have spoken to, who were part of that, they feel very hurt that, despite doing what they have done, and no casualty, mind you, it's a classic
just one
success.
Injury.
Just one injury, that too in our own area, in India's Indian side of the LOC.
And 9 kilometers deep.
One strike as deep as 9 kilometers.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
And see why they didn't provide or sort of share
if I'm
the
not
footage.
mistaken, I think it was your article in this thing, and then Praveen Swami's article where he talked to some people.
Yes.
And that actually settled the.
And I think
then
one
Indian government came up with the video.
Yes, I think,
later on.
and also I think
But
one
for
of
a
the
week
channels,
we had-
one of the channels spoke to the SP of the other side.
That's right.
Somewhere. I don't
Yes.
remember who.
Yeah.
Perhaps CNN News
But for
18.
about 4 or 5 days, it was
they
complete
didn't-
mayhem. And
yeah, it was complete
so
mayhem.
how did the army chiefs feel? I mean, they said, hey, we've done this, we've killed about 60, 70 people.
Yes.
We've gone 9 kilometers inside.
That's right.
Right? And there are Indians who are not believing us.
Well, they feel let down. The military does feel let down, especially the army. The boys feel let down. But somehow they got, kind of immune to this, because there have been over the past 10, 15 years, and that's a societal problem. It's a problem of the society, Indian society.
So do you think the same kind of disbelief would have been there had there been a non-BJP government and the surgical strike like this?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
I think, even if you look at the earlier instances of whenever somebody has said that, this has happened or that has happened, people won't believe it. This was a much larger thing. But Pakistan's stunned silence,
Yes.
its lack of reaction except for the thing
Denying,
on the LOC and the denying and all that, I think proves what has been a successful strategy. And I have explained in the book, as you are aware, you have read it, that what it gives India, the advantage what it gives, because there is this calculus, the what is called the escalatory ladder, that from sub-conventional response, there was only you're jumping to either a conventional mobilization of the army, and finally talking about the nuclear bogey, which the Pakistanis keep talking about. We have actually given, Indian army has given itself another option between these two extremes.
Do you actually think this can be repeated?
It can be repeated in a different form, in a different location. And don't believe me, but believe the former chief of the army, who was said in the documentary that was done based on my book in the History Channel just the other day, where he says we have the ability and the capacity to do it again, and if necessary, again and again. So I think his word should be taken much more seriously than my word, and I'm only quoting those people there.
Yeah. So here is this question where you, in fact, now the other thing that I found about this book was that you've actually given a lot of facts that run contrary to the government's assertion that we are doing all we can, for the development of the military. Of course, you praise Modi's doctrine and you talk about the government, but a lot of facts that you give about our preparedness. You talk about the CAG report that actually said we are combat ready for only, was it 2 days or 10 days? 10 days or something like that.
That's right.
Now, the other thing also that, in fact, I tweeted about it as well, which is that in the aftermath of the Uri attack, we ordered about $4 billion worth of equipment.
That's right.
Now, would you call this preparedness? I mean, do you think we were waiting for something like this to happen to kind of, here is another thing like proactive, reactive kind of a thing? Why couldn't we settle this before?
Okay.
So that actually ran through the whole book, because
that's an important question. I'll answer that, with a little bit of figures and other stuff.
First, the CAG one. I mean, do you think
the CAG report is from 2012.
Yeah.
In fact, CAG and if you remember General V.K. Singh's letter to the government, which was leaked, and which he speaks about hollowness in air defense, in the night blindness of the armor, all that he speaks about. Now, when this government took over, to their horror, the defense ministers, that is Jaitley and Parrikar in succession, discovered that some kind of critical ammunition. It's actually the full form is very long. It's called
starts with M,
armor-piercing, fin-stabilized
Right.
ammunition, or AFP, DSP, or something of that kind. Now that was down to 2 days of supplies.
Yeah.
Now
Down to 2, as against the requirement of at least 20 days.
20 days. Now that kind of ammunition is a very specialized ammunition. The OFB has only that limited capacity.
But this is not in the Lok Sabha records. I mean,
It's
this
not
is
in
again,
the Lok Sabha records.
So where is the transparency? I mean, something as cataclysmic as this
Yes.
should be known to the public. The media should, should have taken the
Well, I
government.
think this latest report of the CAG, which also flags all this, some of these issues are there about how critical. It is there in bits and pieces. They don't talk about particular ammunition for reasons of security. I actually pointed it out to bring out the seriousness of it.
Right.
That was one example. I can cite 100 other examples, but this was one very glaring example of this. And the Ordnance Factory Board has only that much limited capacity. Yeah. So the government, after taking over, actually started looking at how to make up this deficiency. Now, they were in negotiation with different countries, as well as telling OFB to up its game and say, okay, you start manufacturing. So they were already in that process. The orders were placed and all that. So when I say they purchased those 25,000 crores worth of ammunition and equipment, it is suddenly a realization and a pragmatic move that in case there's a backlash, in case Pakistan moves or takes it to a higher level, in the immediate requirement, do we have that? We don't have it. It was going to come in the next 6 months or 8 months, whatever. But if you needed it immediately in the next 2-3 months, do you have it? No, you didn't have it. So you sent out special teams with financial powers given and purchase on the spot and bring it back. I mean, I know of one instance where one shipment was to be airlifted. India sent out its plane to bring it from a country, and then it discovered that the ship had already left. So the ship came to a port. It was immediately fast-tracked, cleared, and brought to the depots, because India also factored in a kind of a backlash from the Pakistanis. In case they did that, they wanted to be prepared. So the purchase was fast-tracked to overcome that immediate requirement.
Okay. So right now, so we are post Operation X, which was the surgical
the name
strike.
Of the surgical strike. Yeah.
And as the Army Chief has said, that there could be many more Operation X's.
That's right.
How prepared are we for a non-stop combat? I don't know the military term for it. Yeah. So it was 10 days before. From 20 to 2 it came down. Now it's 10.
Yes.
Do you think that's enough for a?
I'll say like this.
Or are we talking of archaic terms that were used 40, 50 years ago?
There is something called a war wastage reserve that the military uses, that they always talk about, or requirement of a 40-day supplies for a 40-day war.
Yes.
That may be true in the in theory, but in today's world, no war, in my view, can go on more than a week or 10 days maximum. So what the government has done now is, it is going to step by step. It has said we have given enhanced financial powers to the vice chiefs, the number 2 of each of the armed force. And they have been told to make up or be ready for what is called 10I, that is 10 days of intense war.
I see.
While simultaneously the preparation for 20 days or stocking for 20 days and then 30 days is going on.
Right.
But the priority at the moment and the fast-track purchase under the enhanced and decentralized powers is 10I. So right now they are making up for preparing for what is called a 10 days of intense war.
Right.
So that is the way I think they're structuring it. 10 days of intense war in the short term, 20 days in the medium term, and 30 days in the long term. So from 40, the final
so it's a great
threshold is come to 30 days.
Right. Gosh, there's so many questions, Nitin. I had jotted down from Litul Gogoi to Burhan Wani to Balochistan.
Yes.
To, in fact, we haven't talked about the Indian domestic insurgency, Mao Rajnath Singh, and the NSCN-K camp and things of that sort. But we've hopefully out of time. Still about 5-10 minutes to go. I can't let you go without, because you've been a journalist for 34 years. So ask these couple of questions.
Sure.
One is, how important, and obviously, I mean, it's very clear from, you know, this book that you've got tremendous access to a lot of, very important people in the military as well as in the government. How does that stifle your possible criticism of it? Because you haven't really criticized the government. At the same time, you have given the facts. Now you can, you know, for the reader to make 2 and 2 together. So reading your facts has become very clear that you are in fact criticizing the government on many areas, especially when you talk of, in fact, you talk of the MiGs still being there. You talk of I think you talk in detail about the Rafale.
That's right.
The thing. Then you talk about our domestic production,
The military industrial base not being there.
Yes. So the question is, does that hinder your criticism? Because politicians may say they're very thick-skinned.
That's right.
But I don't know how very thick-skinned they are if you actually disturb them or hit them with a lot of facts. Do you think that your access or your friendliness, objective friendliness, you may like to call it, with politicians and the military personnel could hinder your journalistic aspects?
Well, I am somebody who believes that I should not be criticizing for the sake of criticism,
right,
or just to prove that I am a journalist. So on the one hand, on the other, I don't believe in that. Yeah. I don't think journalists should believe that they're completely objective, because you cannot be. You know, as a human being, you are subjective for many things. So either you believe in something that is happening, or you do, you know, kind of a criticism. If you look at my track record over the years, I reported the Kargil conflict for Outlook magazine. I was laudatory for the bravery of the soldiers, but I actually was responsible for the most critical and the most explosive stuff on Kargil.
In fact, that's going to be my last question,
yeah,
so don't hijack that question.
No, I won't hijack that. So I am actually, I go case by case. Yeah. Now in this case, as I've said in my introduction, I think, that this is like half a draft of the history of what is happening. If I update this at a future date, which I intend to, maybe there will be a little more criticism. But what I see in this government is there is intent, which is clear, of changing things, taking proactive measures, not sitting idle and thinking we'll react to everything that comes in, taking proactive measures, in not just in military or foreign policy, but in small little things, scientific, ISRO being given, you know, more prominent role in helping different ministries, going out to the Indian Ocean, building a base in Seychelles and Mauritius, which was pending for 20 years. I mean, they had offered us for a long time. So I see this government trying with best intentions, and therefore I am not being critical about it. There's much to be critical about, but let's give it a chance. Okay. It's the first time it's come. It's trying to do something with some kind of a majority. Our procedures are to be corrected. They have done a great beginning as far as procurement is concerned. It needs to be carried through and it needs to be implemented, but defense is a long gestation period, so I'm willing to give it time. Maybe if we meet 2 years later, we'll talk more critically, but that's my...
I mean, the reason why I asked this is because, I mean, it's common knowledge now that a lot of people who were actually covering defense, journalists covering defense for the UPA, under the UPA, are terribly angry at this government. They seem to be criticizing it, as you were saying, just for the sake of criticizing it. So I wonder if access has got something to do with it, that, you know, their bitterness has kind of crept in. So that
will be, I mean, it would be a mix of things. This government is much more tight-lipped, much more sort of closed, if I can use that word. It doesn't leak until the decision is taken. So, and plus I think I have the advantage of having left day-to-day journalism 3.5 years ago. And therefore maybe people are more open to me, much more open to me. They know that I'm not going to jump at, you know. And in any case, I've practiced journalism in a different manner, thanks to some very wise people who advised me or taught me,
the old guard
in the early days, that I'm not here for a short-term gain. You know, sometimes I might keep the confidence in order to gain trust and confidence, and which I'll get a bigger thing. In fact, M.V. Kamath told me in 1984, one of the 3 mantras he gave me was that it is more important what you don't write than what you write.
Right.
Apart from the other two, where he said, do serious work but never take yourself seriously. Don't think you're going to topple governments, you're going to bring in the revolution, but do serious work.
Okay, I was going to ask you one last question.
Yes.
But then I've made it into two small ones. So the first one was, this recent controversy about the spy and the Quint piece that actually came out. And then, so there were a few journalists who covered defense. And I think Praveen Swami said that journalism should always speak truth.
That's right.
Now, that kind of was jarring to me because, I mean, you can't just, in the garb of speaking truth, you can't give away military positions. You can't, you can't talk a lot about defense matters.
That's right.
By saying that journalism and I'm going to speak the truth.
Yeah.
Now, do you actually support or are you against this embedded journalism? I mean, this whole term came about during the Iraq war.
Sure.
And then a lot of press people actually got embedded into the army thing.
That's right.
Do you think that is a good journalistic practice?
I don't think so. It is a case by case. I think India has done it long ago in 1971.
Right.
Actually, if you look at that very famous picture of surrender instrument being signed,
General
Arora and General Niazi, there is one gentleman in specs and white and black jacket sitting on the table on the left hand side. He's Surajit Sen of All India Radio.
Is that right?
So
I didn't know that.
the media had a position on the high table in that time. So I think we have to be prudent. I don't think embedded journalism is a good thing in the long run, because then you get only one-sided view. But you're forced to do it sometimes. Like I did it with the Elam War 4. I had no other option but to go with the Sri Lankan military, because the access to the other side, the LTT, was cut off completely. You have no choice. Or in Kargil, you couldn't have crossed over to the Pakistani side. You could always do. So these are circumstances that dictate it. But in Delhi, if you're doing defense reporting or whatever, you can always be balanced. You need not give away secrets, but you can still question.
Right.
Which I think it's also about personalities. I'm a very, you can call me timid. I'm not aggressive. So I sort of that reflects in my, my writing also. So I choose my words carefully. I don't want to give out secrets. That's the journalism that I have practiced. And it hasn't taken me, I mean, it has taken me where I am, good or bad, but I'm here.
Okay, so the last question, in fact, we'll devote whatever time we have for this one. So this is concerning, as you mentioned, that you were also one of the prominent journalists to actually have covered Kargil.
That's right.
And this is away from the book, because of course the book doesn't, And there was this controversy about Barkha.
Yeah.
And in
You're
fact,
talking about Barkha Dutt.
Barkha Dutt, yes, who was also there. In fact, she was the one who kind of came to prominence after that thing.
Yeah.
And there was this controversy about Barkha having triggered, some sort of calamity out there up next to the Tiger Hill. And she hasn't really clarified on this instance, just to say that she said, I talked to General Malik, and he said Barkha is not responsible. But she hasn't, given more details about that. And I think our viewers and a lot of people over the last, it's almost 17 years, 18 years, would be interested to know what actually happened, because you were there. So could you please explain in detail for, take about 4 or 5 minutes, last 4 or 5 minutes. I'm so sorry we've run over time.
Don't worry.
But this is important for posterity's sake.
No, absolutely.
What happened?
Absolutely. Look, the Tiger...
You worked for Outlook?
I worked with Outlook. I had the leeway to not be everywhere because I was in a weekly magazine. Everyone else was under pressure, those who were daily reporters, newspapers or channels. There were about 2 or 3 broadcasting channels that were
and
there.
Our first televised
war as far as Kargil is concerned. So we were all there at that old Dras Brigade headquarters when the Tiger Hill assault began, the Bofors gun was firing from much behind us.
Right.
It is about 30-35 kilometers behind us from where they were firing, because that is the range that Bofors has. So they were bombarding Tiger Hill, and of course the infantrymen were supposed to go and then capture Tiger Hill. So as it began, we were all there at the Dras Brigade headquarters. We all used to be gathered there, and there was a informal arrangement with the then second in command of the Dras Brigade, who would brief media. So we had gone friendly with the media over the previous 30 days or so. Yeah. So we were all there. So when the assault began, from what I remember, everyone was riveted and watching, the the bombs falling there and all that.
So there were what, 40, 30, 40 of you
40,
there?
45 people would be there. They would constantly come and go, but generally that was the number. And when we were gathered there around evening time, the television reporters, including Barkha, they were, I think, if I remember correctly, there were two others from ZTV and Aaj Tak. I don't remember their names. There used to be also somebody from CNN International, an Indian origin person, but anyway, was he there or not, I don't remember. So this happened, and the television reporters really couldn't show their piece to cameras as if they are on the battlefield, because Tiger Hill was at a distance. So
and you were the print guys.
We were the print guys. We were taking and we didn't even have cameras. We didn't have mobiles, nothing.
Yeah.
And I was not interested because I have always had a photographer from Outlook coming every week, a fresh photographer to take photographs. So they were doing all that. So I was nonchalantly, many of us were standing there, a typical print guy, not interested in all this. And I spent 23 years in print too, and then came to television. So the television guys were a little upset that they couldn't capture this to show their viewers, and their deadlines were approaching. So I think they approached a senior officer in the Dras Brigade and said, "Can we have something, firing behind us, which can show that this is happening?"
Wow.
So you can call it enthusiasm, you can call it courtesy. It can be viewed both ways. The officer agreed and said, "Okay, we'll get something to fire." So
this is during the war.
During the war, and that was happening. And in any case, that was a safe area in that sense, because sometimes the shells used to fall, but they were accident shells. Accidental
you know how
shells.
terribly old-fashioned he is. He's calling it courtesy.
Yeah, because somebody is requesting you. So the military is very chivalrous, the officers. And so they said, okay, we'll do something. So they started, having this multi-barrel rocket launcher firing away. And of course,
at Tiger Hill. At
Tiger Hill and nearby targets which were there. There were the smaller targets also. Yeah. So he could justify it by saying that, look, it is required because you're firing for effect or whatever. To bring that question about whether Barkha sort of brought that attack onto the journalist or that place, you cannot blame her technically. Yeah. But
because she requested,
and others also requested. It's not just her, but the other two also, I'm sure, requested, and that was there. And then they also thought that Tiger Hill is far away. The people are deeper inside. The Pakistanis, nothing. From what one recollects and what one heard after that was that a heat signature of the MBRL and of these weapons, because the brigade headquarters does not attack.
Yes,
it's the battalions and the companies which go. So brigade headquarters would not be attacking anything. So the heat signature of that particular equipment must have been picked up by the weapon locating radars on the other side by the Pakistanis.
Okay. And how far was this from the bunker?
No, the bunker where we used to run into, or the journalists or others used to run into, is about half a kilometer inside the camp.
Right.
So this was on the road. There was a PCO next to it, where
journalists would make a call and all
soldiers were making a call on the satellite phone most of the time. It was like on concessional rates.
So the Pakistani radars picked up the heat signal
this firing. Not knowing that this is a brigade headquarters or whatever, because they were in depth. I'm guessing that they were in the depth, and then they saw. They must have locked onto it. They started shelling.
This was night time, or this was?
This was dusk. And there, the night falls only around 9 o'clock in the summer in Ladakh. So about 8:39.
Right.
So even I would say it would be 8:39. It's not fully dark. It's getting dark. That kind of thing. So the shells fell, and we all ran into the bunker, and we sort of
including Barkha.
Including Barkha, everyone. Then the military would first ensure that no civilian is hit there. Right. So they all herded us into all that. That happened, and we went in. We didn't even realize whatever happened. But later we learnt, and this is again hearsay. I have not seen this. I have not heard from anybody, but this is what one heard, that 3 people got killed near that PCO, 3 soldiers. Now that became an issue. But okay, I've worked with Barkha, she's a friend, this thing.
And this is the first time you're actually narrating this instance?
Well, I think I've written about it in Outlook that time, but I will not blame her. Journalists will always be enthusiastic to get the best would also be very enthusiastic to get better than anybody else. So I would actually put it as a combination of circumstances, the over enthusiasm of the military officers, and just that bad luck as it comes in, that this happened. So I think in a way she is right when she tells, sort of writes in a book that General Malik told her you're not to be blamed, because they would have carried out an inquiry after that, the court of inquiry as they call it. Whether that officer or officers got punished for it or we still don't know. I mean, I have not actually tried to find out.
Right.
It's a casualty of war in that sense. It could have been any one of us.
And we won the war. So.
We won the war, so it got. So let's not blame her. I mean, there are other instances in 2611. There are other places where media has overplayed its hand.
Yeah.
But there are mistakes on every side. Yeah. So let's not blame only the media for this. Not just because I'm a media person. I'm being very objective about what I'm saying. Yeah. But that's the way it is.
Yeah. Well, thank you for this clarification, and of course for this book, which I highly recommend, Securing India the Modi Way.
Thank you very much.
And it was a real pleasure talking to you.
Thank
Nitin.
you, Anand.
I'm sorry, there were a lot of questions we couldn't get through, but because I wanted your detailed answers to, a few of the
but
ones
we got
that
a little distracted somewhere else,
that's
but
great.
that's okay.
All right. So thanks, Nitin. And remember, viewers, when the public pays, the public is served. When the corporations pay, the corporations are served. Subscribe to Newslaundry. Thanks very much.